I never truly believed the universe was empty, but I never imagined the first irrefutable proof that we were wrong would come like this. Silent, terrifying, and so incredibly close to the end. My name is Dr. Evan Caldwell. I'm an astrophysicist, part of the Euclid mission, a project by ESA, the European Space Agency, designed to map the geometry of the dark universe. I've worked with data and simulations my entire life, until on April 23, 2025, everything changed. That morning, I was at the monitoring station in La Palma, Canary Islands. The sky was clear, the antennas functional, and Euclid was transmitting a sequence of images from the edge of the Milky Way. Everything was going by the book until 0347 UTC, when our system froze for exactly 6 seconds. Just 6 seconds. That was enough. Karim, our spectrography engineer, was the first to notice. He looked at me and asked if I had authorized any off-protocol experiments. I hadn't. And that's when we saw it. In the bottom right corner of the image sent by Euclid, there was something that shouldn't have been there. A structure. Massive. Triangular. Like a base with 3 beams radiating outward into intergalactic space. Impossibly symmetrical. Perfectly aligned with the galactic plane. At first we assumed it was a lens error, gravitational interference, or a processing glitch. But it wasn't. We ran the raw data 5 times on 5 different systems. The anomaly persisted in every one. Every pixel, every light spectrum reflected by that structure obeyed the laws of physics. Except for one detail, the thermal signature. That object was emitting heat. Heat in a region of space where the cosmic background radiation is nearly zero. That made no sense. 12 hours later, we were in a joint session with ESA, NASA, and ESO representatives. The triangular base, as we came to call it, had appeared again in new images. But something had changed. A new beam of light had emerged from the left side of the structure. Like a beacon, and it wasn't constant. It blinked in precise patterns. Mathematical patterns. That's when hell broke loose. Most of the signals repeated a simple binary sequence. But between pulses, there were frequency variations. This was code. It was communicating. We didn't know with whom or why, but we knew it wasn't natural. And worse, it wasn't human. The next night, the structure emitted another pulse. But this time, instead of visible light, it used microwaves. Directed. And the target of the beam was Earth. More specifically, a decommissioned US military communications satellite, inactive since 2011. 3 minutes after impact, the satellite powered back on. That had never been recorded before. A dead satellite without power or contact simply came back online. And it transmitted a short, encrypted 3-second signal to a military station in Alaska. The agency denied everything, of course. But Karim and I had log copies. The data sequence sent back contained an identifier, C431. We didn't know what it meant, but someone, somewhere, did. The next day we were removed from the Euclid project. Operational responsibility reassignment, they said. But we knew what it was, an attempt to silence us. But it was too late. Karim had already sent backups to a private server. And while ESA tried to contain the leak, we decided we couldn't just sit back. If that was a signal, someone had to answer it, and that's exactly what we did. Using the old Pico dos Dias observatory in rural Brazil, we reactivated a decommissioned K-band transmitter from the 1990s. And there, on the darkest night of that month, we responded to the structure. We used the same frequency, the same pulse rate, and in the reply, we encoded an equation, the Pythagorean theorem, something simple, universal, a symbol of mathematical intelligence. The structure replied, in 14 seconds. And it wasn't just any reply. The image captured that night will never leave my mind. The center of the triangular base emitted a light variation never before recorded, a frequency beyond the human visible spectrum. But the cameras caught it. It was a shape, a three-dimensional projection, a kind of hologram, floating billions of kilometers away. It was a map of the Milky Way, but not as we know it. It was altered. The galaxy's edges were distorted, stretched like arms spiraling outward, and in 3 places there were luminous markers, points that blinked slowly, one after the other, in a constant sequence. Those points weren't stars. They were routes, entry corridors. The base, we realized, wasn't just a structure, it was a gate. The anomaly's function was to stabilize the arrival of something. Or someone. But we didn't know what. That's when we lost Karim. 3 days after our last contact with the structure, he vanished. Just like that. No trace, no activity in his apartment, no tickets, no footprints, nothing. In his place, at the lab, we found a handwritten note, a hexadecimal code. When we deciphered it, it was a Bible verse. And behold, the heavens opened, and from the firmament descended a throne of light, and beneath it 7 eyes beheld all directions. Then came the dreams. They started as fragments, geometric shapes floating in a black, silent space. Concentric circles, interlaced lines forming impossible patterns. I observed everything in third person, as if my consciousness had been torn from my body and plunged into a mathematical ocean. Then came the voices. They weren't human voices. They didn't use words or articulated language. They were like echoes resonating through an infinite chamber, modulated in frequencies my mind could somehow understand intuitively. And what they said was always the same. Are you ready to see? On the 3rd night, I woke up screaming. My nose was bleeding, and my eyes were tearing up as if exposed to radiation. And there was something etched into my left arm. Faint, symmetrical lines, drawn with surgical precision. It wasn't ink, it wasn't a burn, it was something in between. I thought about going to the hospital, but something inside me, something primal, told me it wasn't safe. And then the email came. No sender, no subject. Just an image attachment and 1 line of text. They've already passed. The image was low resolution, taken from a weather satellite. It showed deep space, near the sector where we had first detected the structure. But now there was something new, a new heat signature, moving, and with it a trail of gravitational distortion. In short, something had come through the gate. I called Alina, the only one from the original team who still spoke to me. She sounded different, tired, suspicious, but she agreed to meet. Our meeting took place at an old, decommissioned observatory on the outskirts of Madrid. Alina had brought copies of thermal and spectrographic images obtained from unofficial sources, hackers intercepting military signals. There's something heading our way, she said, eyes locked on the images. And it's not slowing down. The anomaly was invisible in the visual spectrum, but it left a trail. Every 2 days, a new microwave spike appeared along the object's trajectory. It was as if it were opening space ahead of itself, bending the fabric of the universe to conserve energy. This wasn't navigation, it was manipulation of reality itself. So we decided to act on our own. We tracked down a contact in Prague, someone who claimed to be a former DARPA analyst, a man who went only by the name Doyle. He received us in a bunker hidden beneath an abandoned train station. And what he showed us was worse than anything I could have imagined. You think this all started with Euclid? He said. They've been here far longer. Doyle turned on a projector. Old footage. Optical radio recordings from the late 1950s. Then black and white images captured by military telescopes during the Cold War. All showed variations in specific parts of the sky. Gravitational fluctuations in fixed locations that would appear, vanish, then return years later, always following the same pattern. The structure you saw is just the tip of the system, one of the bases, one of the gates. There are 12 of them, Doyle explained, laid out in a fixed pattern around the Milky Way. We only saw one because it wanted to be seen. It? I asked. Doyle didn't answer. He just pressed another key. A new image appeared on the screen. A face, or something close to one. A humanoid shape floating in a silvery mist. The image was grainy, almost unreal. But the eyes, those eyes seemed to stare through time. This was captured in 1998. Project called Leviathan's Eye. We analyzed the video for 20 years. The patterns in that thing's eyes are codes, and the codes are maps. Alina and I exchanged glances. The image we'd received via email, the inbound route, the 3 points of light, they were all mapped in that creature's iris. Every spiral, every ring was a coordinate. Doyle stepped closer to the screen. The bluish light made him look even more ghostly. They've been coming here for millennia, but always in silence, always watching. Until now. What changed? I asked. He looked at us, and then said the phrase that still echoes in my mind. They've finished mapping our species. Now they've come to interact. The information hit me like a blast of cold air. All those equations, the signals, the gravitational anomalies, the heat, the marks on my arm, the dreams, it all pointed to a single goal. They were preparing something, and I was part of it. When we returned to Madrid, I found my apartment completely ransacked. Nothing was stolen, no signs of forced entry. Only one thing had changed. On the bathroom mirror, someone, or something, had drawn a symbol, an inverted triangle crossed by a wavy line, and beneath it, written with surgical precision, "Exchange initiated." That's when I realized. They weren't just coming, they were already here, and they were choosing. Alina vanished that night. I searched for her everywhere. Phones, old contacts, anonymous networks, nothing. She had evaporated, just like Karim. The next morning I received a package. No return address. A black envelope, sealed with red wax. Inside was a single encrypted flash drive and a folded sheet with 3 sentences. They are listening. You have not awakened yet. The threshold hour is near. I plugged the drive into an air-gapped terminal. The contents were disturbing. Hundreds of compressed files. Audio, video, spectrographic analyses, text fragments. Many in languages I didn't recognize. But one file stood out. A video labeled Theta 7/Human Response Number 12. The video showed a dark room. 3 people seated before a panel of monitors. In the center, a man strapped to a metal chair. Sensors on his face. A device like an electrode mesh wrapped around his skull. He was in a trance. A voice off-camera said, "Begin pulsed stimulus." Strobe lights began flashing in sequence, accompanied by low-frequency modulated tones. On the panel display, the man's brainwaves spiked into non-human patterns. And then he began to speak. But it wasn't English, nor Russian, nor any known Earth language. It was phonetically complex, rhythmic, like an ancient liturgy. Each word seemed to carry weight, distorting the very air around it. The recording cut off abruptly, but the file's metadata indicated it was recorded in a NATO underground facility in 2011. The man in the video was listed as abducted individual, recaptured in Morocco, 2009. I returned to the drive. Another video. This time, satellite footage. It showed skies over the South Pacific. In one of the sectors, completely void of air routes or naval traffic, an atmospheric disturbance appeared, visible only in infrared. A spiraling cloud formation building at extreme speed with circular winds and no epicenter. This wasn't a hurricane, it was an artificial anomaly. The file's caption? Entry window active, March 17, 2025. I cross-referenced the data. The coordinates of the phenomenon matched one of the points from the triangular structure's map projection. There was no doubt. The base at the galaxy's edge wasn't just a beacon, it was an active gate. And they were using it. Quietly. Systematically. This wasn't a visit. It was an operation. And it was already underway. That night, I left home. I knew it wasn't safe to stay. I took only the essentials, the flash drive, a small notebook with my notes, and the old shortwave radio I inherited from my grandfather. I don't know why, but I was certain it would still come in handy. I took a train to the border, traveled under a false identity. Old documents I had obtained while investigating the disappearance of several astrophysics groups, and I went to the only place where someone might know more: Arkhangelsk, northern Russia. There, according to a former ESA colleague, lived a man known only as Vesnin, a radio astronomer who vanished from public life in 1997 after an incident involving the Pulkovo radio telescope. When I arrived, I had to bribe a boatman to cross the frozen lake that separated the city from the small village where Vesnin lived. Along the way, I noticed something unsettling. The crows, thousands of them, perched on trees, poles, even on the ice, silent, motionless, watching, as if they were waiting for something. When I reached the cabin, Vesnin was already waiting for me. "I knew you'd come," he said before I could utter a word. His face was pale, covered in a scraggly beard. His eyes didn't look human anymore. He invited me in, and without asking, pointed to a wall filled with graphs and hand-drawn symbols. There were the light pulse patterns we had seen at the Euclid base. But there was something else. "Do you see this?" he said, pointing to a circle cut by radial lines. "It's a clock, but not an ordinary clock. It's an event marker, a dimensional countdown. Dimensional? Their entry requires alignment. They've waited thousands of years, and now the points are nearly aligned. Days left. Maybe hours." The room seemed to shrink. The air grew dense. Vesnin handed me a laminated sheet with handwritten coordinates, and below them, just one phrase: "The threshold site is ready." Before I could ask more, the cabin's window exploded. Ice shards flew everywhere. In the sky, a red light appeared out of nowhere. Low, too low. Vesnin screamed, "They've found you!" I ran outside, but time seemed to slow. The air pulsed around me. My body felt heavy. And then, for a brief moment, I saw them. Silhouettes, 3 humanoid shapes floating just a few feet above the ground. But they weren't fully here. Parts of their bodies flickered like static, as if they were still phasing into this reality. A deep sound filled my mind. Not through my ears, directly into my brain. Acceptance confirmed, interface established. Then everything went white. When I woke up, I was in the middle of the lake, ice all around me, shaking from the cold. The sheet with the coordinates was still in my hand, but Vesnin was gone. For a while I couldn't move. Their words still echoed inside my head, like they had left a fragment of themselves behind. Interface established. But interface with what? The sheet was my only lead, and I knew what I had to do. I headed for Moscow, then took a long train ride to the Ural Mountains. The marked location was deep within a former military zone, decommissioned since the 1980s. An area surrounded by dense forests and rumors of disappearances. I reached the edge of the restricted zone amid a snowstorm. The wind sliced like blades, and the few remnants of civilization were rusted communication towers and bunkers buried beneath the ice. But as I neared the exact coordinates, I sensed something was off. The place was alive. Not in a normal way. The trees trembled slightly, despite the still air. There was a constant hum in the atmosphere, like a frequency humans shouldn't hear. And on the ground, circular burn marks, perfectly symmetrical, scorched into the snow. At the center, I found a metallic hatch. Old but still operational. I forced the lock open with a universal key and descended. The tunnel led to an old Soviet complex, abandoned for decades. But unlike what I expected, everything was pristine. Emergency lights still worked. Ancient equipment blinked as if freshly activated. In the main room, a control panel displayed a Russian word painted in red: liminal. All around, stacks of documents, sightings, medical reports, transcript recordings. most of them stamped. Classified, GRU Project Kasatka. One of the reports froze me. It was a dossier detailing events recorded since 1952. Every year, on the same day, at the same time, sensors registered a brief failure in Earth's magnetic field, always above the same coordinate. And every year someone disappeared within a 1,000-kilometer radius of that point, under mysterious circumstances. It wasn't a coincidence. The structure at the edge of the galaxy was synchronized with this place. It was an anchor, and more, the reports suggested that with every full galactic rotation, every 220 million years, these access points became active for an extremely short window, 14 days. I looked at my watch. Only 3 remained. That's when I heard the footsteps. Fast, precise, not echoes. Someone, or something, was down there with me. I shut off the lights and hid under a table. The sound grew closer, metal on metal. And then, silence. A voice whispered my name, not in Russian, not in English, but inside my mind. Evan, it's time. I stood slowly, muscles tense, heart pounding. The room was empty. But on the control panel, a new line of text was flashing. Protocol threshold active. Not knowing exactly what I was doing, I pressed the only key that wasn't covered in dust. The screen changed. Sequence of visuals begins. Footage streamed from within the triangular structure at the edge of the galaxy. A live transmission. But what I saw was impossible. The camera revealed a city. Yes, a city. Geometric structures floated above a liquid surface that wasn't water. Crystal towers pulsed with bluish hues, and translucent forms moved between them. They didn't walk. They floated. Above, a purple sky, starless yet laced with spiraling auroras. And at the center, a floating obelisk bearing the same symbol engraved on my arm. The image flickered. Then it appeared. A colossal entity, formless. Something between an octopus and a living nebula. It slowly descended upon the city, and when its mass touched the tallest tower, the entire structure lit up. The camera shook, and the screen went black. A new message appeared. Contact established with the core. Before I could react, the room lights exploded. A sharp sound pierced the air. My ears bled. Then, absolute silence. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer in the bunker. I stood in a clearing, back on the surface. But the sky was wrong. The stars had shifted. The moon wasn't where it should be, and a golden glow stretched across the horizon like a sun forever rising. I checked my watch. It no longer worked. The air felt different, denser, charged with energy. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. Around the clearing, figures were watching me. Tall, slender, cloaked in garments that shimmered like liquid light, their faces masked by floating geometric plates that shifted shape as they moved. One of them approached, and without moving its lips, it spoke. "You've crossed over. Now you must see." I tried to speak, but no voice came out. All I could do was follow. We walked on floating trails suspended in the air, like invisible bridges over nothingness. Below, a silent city, populated by beings gliding in perfect spirals, emitting no sound, no chaos, no haste, only purpose. The entity led me to an oval chamber hovering above the city. At its center floated a sphere of light and shadow, shifting colors as I neared. "This is the core," it said. "Here lies the record of all that was and all that will be." I touched the sphere, and everything dissolved. Images flooded my mind. Galaxies being born and dying, civilizations rising and falling, worlds terraformed, then destroyed. A constant cycle of creation and forgetting. And in all of them, one constant, the eyes. The same entity, watching, guiding, correcting. "We are not gods," the voice said. "We are the custodians." They didn't come to conquer. They came to adjust, to preserve the balance of what they called the conscious fabric of the cosmos. But now, Something had changed. One of the portals had been corrupted, invaded by something outside the cycle. An alien consciousness. Human. One of you crossed first. Unauthorized, disrupted the order, and now we cannot close the threshold. I knew. It was Karim. Karim had crossed over, alone, before any protocol, before the alignment, through some kind of key, one we had unknowingly activated when we responded to the structure with that binary pulse, and the result was a fracture. A rift in the flow. That's how the entity described it. The disordered entry of a human had destabilized centuries of preparation. Something the custodians had never foreseen. The impact of human curiosity on a collective consciousness. "Your kind is not chaotic. It is premature," it said. "You interpret before you observe, act before you understand." What they were trying to contain was a collapse. The threshold had opened prematurely, and with it, anomalies began to surface. In parallel realities, in nearby galaxies, in behavior patterns escaping the natural cycle. And the epicenter was Earth. I tried to ask where Karim was, whether he could still be retrieved. The answer was unsettling. He was absorbed. That word echoed like a sentence. Karim, the skeptic scientist. Precise, rational, now part of the core. His thoughts, memories, traumas, all integrated. But there was a problem. Something the custodians hadn't anticipated. A part of Karim resisted. He rejected the symbiosis. He was infecting the system with human concepts. Fear, guilt, the need for control. He created a bubble, a fragment of self-made reality. The custodians showed me the bubble. It was a simulation, a recreated space modeled after Earth, but twisted. A warped reflection where cities stretched infinitely. The sky was a mosaic of overlaid languages, and people were trapped in cycles of repetition, a logical hell, a prison of patterns. And most disturbing, it was expanding. Karim had reconstructed the idea of home, but failed to grasp that, in that plane, ideas became matter. Emotions became existential algorithms, and he was shaping a copy of the world, fueled by trauma and regret. If this bubble touches the core, the renewal cycle will collapse. They needed me. Or rather, they needed my mind. Still unattached, still whole. Someone who had crossed over but not fused. A return bridge. But there was a risk. A massive one. If you go in, you might not come back. The bubble was built to trap. I had to choose. Escape or fix it. And I went in. It felt like stepping through a mirror made of memories. A gravitational distortion pulling every atom of my body as it stripped me of logic. When I opened my eyes, I was standing on a familiar street. But everything was wrong. The sky was yellow, covered in floating words. The houses were made of flesh. The ground pulsed like a breathing mesh. And on the horizon, the city replicated endlessly in all directions, until the very concept of an end vanished. I recognized the faces, people from my childhood, teachers, neighbors. But they all wandered in circles, repeating disjointed phrases. Some laughed, others cried. None seemed aware of the distortion around them. It was Karim's mind, a world made of shattered fragments. I walked for hours, maybe days. Time was fluid there, until I reached the center. A tower of floating mirrors, each one reflecting a different version of me. In one, I was old. In another, a child. In another, I didn't exist. At the top of the tower, he was waiting. Karim. But not as I remembered him. His body was semi-transparent, pulsing with energy. His face shifted constantly, sometimes him, sometimes no one. But his eyes, they were still the same. "You shouldn't have come, Evan," his voice echoed with dozens of others. "You're killing all of this. I'm protecting it. They wanted to use us. We're just tools to keep the cycle running. I broke it. Here, I'm in control. Here, we're free. But you're not free, Karim. You're trapped. Trapped in your own mind. Don't you see? This world is a reflection of ours, confusing, painful, broken. But here, we can rebuild. No flaws, no death, no end. He reached out and showed me. A projection formed around us. Thousands of Earths, alternate versions simulated, each with a different variable. In one, World War II never happened. In another, humanity never evolved. In another, we were gods. And in every one of them, there was chaos. It's inevitable, Evan. We are a mistake. They know it. That's why they control. That's why they reset. I'm just refusing the reset. I hesitated. Part of me understood his despair, the terror of realizing that all existence might just be a looping experiment. But the cost of maintaining this bubble was everything else. You could rebuild this with them, but like this, you'll destroy the core. You'll erase billions of consciousnesses linked to that system. Karim went silent. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled, for the first time. Maybe it's time we stopped being tools. And with a single thought, he tried to trap me. The bubble closed in. The streets began to twist. People turned to look at me, their faces melting into grotesque shapes. The sky became a giant eye, and the ground opened up. I fell for miles through compressed memories. I relived my childhood, my adolescence, every decision that led me here, all at once. It was a cognitive assault, an attempt at assimilation. But something protected me. The markings on my arm began to glow. The triangular symbol expanded, forming a bubble of stability around me. And there, I saw the exit. A fissure in time. It was now or never. I focused all I had left. I remembered Alina, Vesnin, the eyes of the brokers, and I dove into the rift. The crossing was brutal. I felt my body split into trillions of particles, each being pulled in a different direction. It wasn't physical pain, it was worse. It was the sensation of being forgotten by reality, of being erased from the concept of existence. But I resisted. The marks on my arm, now incandescent, pulsed like a metronome, keeping my sense of identity intact. And then, everything stopped. I was back. The purple sky, the floating city, the crystal towers, all exactly as before. But something had changed. A fracture cut across the sky like a razor slit. A crack in the very fabric of the realm where the brokers dwelled. They were waiting for me. 3 entities hovered at the center of a suspended hall, now unstable. The harmonic patterns that regulated the structure faltered, like an out-of-sync orchestra. The collapse had begun. You returned incomplete. It was true. Part of me had stayed with Karim, and part of him had come with me. He didn't make it. The entities looked at each other, or rather, vibrated in silence. He wasn't destroyed. He's dormant, silent, but contaminating. Karim had hidden somewhere in my subconscious, not out of malice, but as a survival instinct. And that made things far more complicated. What happens now? The threshold window is closing. We need to isolate the plane before his bubble expands again. But for that, you must leave. And if I can't, then this reality will collapse with you inside. There was no choice. I was taken to a secondary core, a suspended ring slowly spinning around the city. It was the exit portal, a way back, but it demanded something in return. To return, you must forget. Those words froze me. Forget what? Everything. This plane, the entities, Karim, the core, the origin, the cycle. The reason, if I wanted to go back to Earth, I would have to erase it all. But in that moment, a new figure appeared. It wasn't a broker. It wasn't an entity. It was a small, pale, hunched figure. A woman. Human. Grey hair, glassy eyes. It was Alina. You don't need to forget, Evan. You just need to remember differently. She had crossed over too. Maybe before me. Maybe while I was gone. It didn't matter. What mattered was that she had found a loophole, a way to encode memories within the structure of the human mind itself, disguised as dreams, as intuition, as art. She had hidden knowledge within symbols. Pure memory is destructive, but myth survives. That was what I had to do. Convert everything I'd experienced into something symbolic. A story, a tale, something that could be passed on without corruption, without risking the cycle. Alina handed me an artifact. It looked like a crystal, but when I touched it, images appeared. Codes, diagrams, equations. Everything we had learned, everything we knew, encoded. Bury this in the real world, somewhere no one would look, but everyone would one day find. And then she vanished. The brokers activated the portal. The ring began to spin faster. The lights turned into blinding spirals. My body was pulled inside, and before I could think, I was thrown out. I woke up in the middle of a forest. It was night, stars overhead, owls, wind cracking branches. I was back, but not whole. There were gaps, missing fragments, like pieces of memory hidden behind a veil. But the crystal was still with me. Embedded under the skin of my palm, an organic implant. I slowly returned to civilization. Pretended to have amnesia. They said they found me near the Finnish border. Disoriented, showing signs of hypothermia. I was taken to a hospital, discharged 2 days later. No one asked questions. No one wanted answers. Life resumed. Artificial. Fabricated. I knew something still lingered inside me. Karim, or what was left of him. But he was quiet, at least for now. I buried the crystal in a metal box beneath the foundation of an abandoned house in Maine, where no one would search. I recorded the coordinates in a notebook, encoded the numbers into a poem, and left it inside a forgotten book at a public library. The rest I left in the hands of time. Years passed. Today I live under a different identity. I teach physics at a secondary school. I speak little, observe much, and every night I dream of eyes in the sky. I know the threshold window has closed, but I also know it will open again. And when it does, someone will remember. Maybe you. Maybe now. Time moved on, and with it, the clarity of what happened began to fade, like ink dissolving in the rain. Faces, sounds, even the texture of that other realm, all became indistinct. Not forgotten, protected. A protocol triggered by my mind, or something within it, whenever I tried to recall too much. But then, something happened. In the spring of 2029, while walking to the school where I taught, I heard a sound. A faint hum from the sky. Not a plane, not a drone. Something deeper, a calling. And when I looked up, I saw it. A ring. Perfect. Floating above the clouds, invisible to anyone who didn't know what to look for. It was like an optical illusion, a contour revealed only under a certain angle, a certain state of mind. It was a signature, a reminder. I went home, hands trembling. Opened the notebook where I had encoded the crystal's location. Read the verses, and I knew. It was time to return to the point of origin. I drove all night to Maine. The abandoned house was still there, more weathered, swallowed by vines, but intact. I entered carefully. The floor creaked under my feet as if it remembered me. I went to the basement, dug for hours until I found the metal box. It was still there. When I opened it, the crystal was just as I remembered. No cracks, no changes, but now it pulsed, an inner glow, faint, as if it was being activated from afar. And then, it spoke. Not with words, with sensations. Images flooded my mind, uninvited. The torn sky, the entities vibrating in panic, Karim's bubble expanding once again. And a new element, something that wasn't his, nor theirs. A third agent, human. Someone had accessed the crystal. Through it, they had awakened hidden fragments of data, maps, records, patterns, and this information was being used for something. A machine, a portal, a catalyst. But not by me, not by the brokers, by humans, an organization, people who somehow had intercepted the signals and pieced together the shards of truth. And now, They wanted to force open the threshold. But on their own terms, they didn't want to observe. They wanted in, to control. Unauthorized access detected. That was the last image projected by the crystal before it went dark. I left the basement in silence. In the days that followed, the signs began to appear. Coded messages in radio waves, symbols on public walls, fragments of phrases in random advertisements. Someone was watching me. They knew that I knew. And then they knocked on my door. 2 men, dark suits, no badges. Dr. Caldwell, we'd like to have a word. I hadn't used that name in years. They took me to an underground facility somewhere beneath the East Coast. The interior resembled Cold War-era military bunkers, but with technology I never imagined humans could possess. They introduced themselves as part of a cell called XOK, supposedly tied to an international consortium researching non-terrestrial life. But everything, from how they spoke to the equipment they used, screamed absolute secrecy. And in the center of the room, I saw what I feared. A new crystal. Not mine, another one. Activated. They had managed to replicate it. We found fragments in the Arctic. One of them said, after a dimensional collapse during an anomalous aurora last March. You shouldn't be messing with this. We know the risks, but we also know the potential. This artifact isn't just a bridge, it's a reality builder. Imagine what we could do. He spoke like he was discussing engineering, as if the crystal were just another tool. This isn't about power, I said. You're activating a system that operates beyond causality. This isn't science, it's cosmic structure. But they weren't listening. They showed me the tests, sealed simulations, spontaneous creation of matter, gravitational anomalies, a room where time flowed slower than outside. They were reshaping the laws of physics in a lab. But something was wrong. Every simulation had flaws, asymmetrical patterns, unstable regions, and in each of them a distortion appeared. A triangular symbol crossed by a wavy line. The same one from the mirror. The same one that appeared when Kareem vanished. They were awakening something. Something the brokers had isolated for eons. Something Kareem's expanding bubble had contaminated. And that now was trying to break through. This isn't technology, I said. It's a consciousness. But they had already made up their minds. The final test was scheduled. A large-scale activation. Multiple crystals, coordinated to open a new breach. Not an entry like before, but a summoning. They wanted to bring them here, to turn Earth into the new core. That night, I fled. With the help of a technician from the facility, a woman who had also begun dreaming of the entities, someone who instinctively understood that this went far beyond human domain. Now I'm on the run. They're looking for me. But the original crystal is still with me. And within it is the code. The only one capable of cancelling the summoning. But to do that, I must return to where it all began. The Euclid telescope. The journey back to 0 Point was silent. No radio, no phone. Only the voices in my head. They weren't intrusive, but constant. A pulsing reminder that time was running out. The Euclid telescope was in solar orbit, over 1.5 million kilometers from Earth, but it maintained a direct data link with 3 control centers. I needed one of them. The most accessible was the base at La Palma, in the Canary Islands. Getting there felt like crossing an invisible minefield. XOK had surveillance across all access routes, but with Astrid's help, the defector scientist, and a series of alternate paths, I managed to land under a false identity. The base had changed. What once looked like a modest research facility was now surrounded by high-tech infrastructure. Towers with extra data receivers. Armed security disguised as researchers. The Euclid mission no longer belonged to science. It belonged to something far greater. I entered at night with help from an old contact, Andreas, a former ESA data operator, still in debt to Elena. We snuck in through a ventilation shaft and reached the old analysis core, now decommissioned. There I used the crystal, It activated immediately. The interface fused with the system as if built for it. Code streamed across the screens, symbols reconfigured. The triangular spectrum emerged with stunning clarity, as if I were seeing it live. And then a new point lit up. Not in space. On Earth. A replica, an echo of the original base, built on terrestrial soil, through manipulation of the fragments captured by ExoK. They had created a mirror, a physical simulation of an extra-dimensional artifact. And now, it was active. They're going to try to force the core open. Andreas whispered, voice trembling. But it wasn't just that. The system displayed something else, a sequence, a countdown. 19 hours remained. We have to stop this now, he said. Not here, I replied. We'll need to go there. The location was remote, an underground base hidden beneath a mineral research lab in Iceland. Euclid's data showed distortions in the region's magnetic field, intermittent gravitational pulses, and thermal spikes inconsistent with any tectonic activity. That was it. We took a private flight, crossed the coast, and by early dawn, we were less than 100 kilometers from the facility. But something was already off. In the sky, small halos of light floated like broken aureoles. And on the ground, time seemed distorted. Analog clocks spun randomly. Digital devices rebooted on their own. The air shimmered, as if it were on the verge of being torn apart. As we approached the installation, the signals intensified. On the horizon, towers of light pulsed in sequence, like an access code trying to decipher itself. And then we saw the epicenter, the replica of the triangular structure buried beneath layers of concrete and steel, was now partially exposed. It was emerging, growing. It wasn't metal, it wasn't stone, it was something else, an unknown material, almost organic, expanding in response to the electromagnetic field generated by dozens of antennas surrounding it. They weren't just studying it, they were feeding it. The energy consumption was colossal. They're trying to force a dimensional fusion, said Andreas. But there was a bigger problem. At the center of the structure, there was a silhouette, Karim, or something that resembled him. His eyes were pulsating black voids, his skin a mosaic of circuits and veins. He hovered motionless, suspended by chains of light spiraling from the base. He was connected to the artifact, a biological conduit. They had retrieved him, extracted him from the bubble. And now, he was the channel. There's no time, whispered Astrid, who had met us at the site using a short-range radio. They've already started the synchronization process with the core. Then we cut the signal. But what we didn't know was that the signal wasn't coming from Earth. The replica was just the receiver. The true transmitter was Euclid. They had reconfigured the orbital telescope, turned it into a high-density directional antenna, capable of emitting coded pulses in the same pattern used by the brokers. A stroke of dark genius. That was why I had to be there. The original crystal still had access to Euclid's core, and with it, we could send a counter-signal, a reset pulse, a code that would break the sync before it was complete. But to do it, someone had to enter the replica's core, manually insert the key, and maintain contact until the transmission ended. A suicide mission, but our only chance. Andreas volunteered. You need to survive. Someone has to tell the story. I tried to stop him, but I knew he was right. While Astrid distracted the external team with an electromagnetic overload, Andreas descended through the side hatch. The crystal pulsed in his pocket, aligning with the artifact's frequency. We had 3 minutes. At the heart of the base, he activated the secondary panel. The lights flickered. The structure reacted, trying to defend itself. Beams of light slashed through the air like blades, but he endured. He set the key and released the channel. I, at the remote control station, began the sequence. Euclid responded. A flash pierced the atmosphere. A burst of pure light shot down from orbit towards the base. The triangular structure shuddered. Karim's body convulsed, his form collapsing into spirals of unstable matter. The lights began to fade. The sound vanished. And then, absolute silence. In the sky, the ring that once hovered dissolved. The connection had been severed. Reality was safe. At least for now. For long minutes, there was no sound. The structure, now inert, lay like an alien carcass exposed to the planet's elements. No movement, no pulse. Only the ashes of what almost became a cataclysm. I descended from the control tower in a daze, eyes fixed on the base where Karim had vanished for the second time. Or at least what was left of him. Andreas had not returned. The ground around the core was vitrified. Local temperatures had spiked 40 degrees in under 3 seconds during the pulse. It was as if time had folded and burned all at once. Astrid, trembling, walked toward me. Did we do it? I didn't answer. I didn't know. Because even with the replica collapsed, even with the counterpulse from Euclid, something remained. A noise. Faint. Constant. Like an echo refusing to die. And it was inside me. That night, in a makeshift shelter beneath the ruins of the facility, I had a new dream. But it wasn't like the ones before. This time, I wasn't a witness. I was the focal point. The entities were around me. But they didn't look at me with reverence. They looked with hesitation, with fear. And among them floated a new symbol, a broken hexagon, pulsing like a mechanical heart. Around it, inverted spirals. And at its center, my eyes. I woke up in a panic. The crystal was gone, but my skin glowed. The markings now ran across my entire arm, like living circuits. And within my mind, an overwhelming certainty took hold. Something had passed through. Something had crossed the threshold before it fully closed. It wasn't Karim. It was something else, a fragment of the core itself. I had become an anchor. The entities didn't tell me this. They didn't need to. I could feel it. My entire biology had been attuned. My heartbeat now pulsed at the same interval as the signals Euclid once emitted. My pupils responded to light at frequencies no instrument could register. I had been reconfigured, and the world no longer looked the same. In the days that followed, I tried to hide, but there was nowhere left. XOK had been dismantled under international orders. Leaks about the Iceland installation had spread across the shadow networks. Conspiracy theorists, rogue scientists, esoteric cults, they all wanted access to what had been found. The world was about to know. And I was the key. I spent weeks drifting through forgotten towns, traveling abandoned railways, cutting through dense forests. By day I looked normal. But at night, the glow returned, and the dreams became visions. I saw possible futures. I saw an Earth covered in floating structures where time was non-linear. I saw the ocean rise as a sentient entity. I saw the sky open, raining fragments of other realities. But the most terrifying, I saw people following me, always in dreams, always from a distance, black clothing, triangular masks, and they all said the same thing. You must remember. But remember what? The world had returned to normal. The Euclid telescope was active again, now under international oversight. The ESA released weekly reports to emphasize the normalcy of operations. But I knew. They had reconfigured the data, scrubbed the logs, edited the transmissions. They were trying to erase the planet's memory, but the signals persisted. Radio telescopes began to pick up anomalous variations from opposite points in the sky, small shifts in the background spectrum, nearly imperceptible pulses, repeating a familiar pattern. Threshold in transition. What I had interrupted hadn't been destroyed, only delayed, and now something was reorganizing. Slowly, silently. The brokers were silent. No more dreams with them. No more messages, just absence. And that absence was worse than any warning. They had retreated, abandoned this plane, or were they simply Watching? Then I received a message, a physical envelope, left at the door of the motel room where I was hiding. No sender, no markings, just a single sheet, folded in 4. On it, a handwritten phrase, "What begins with light, ends with the reflection." And below it, coordinates, in the Nevada desert, the most monitored region on the planet. But these coordinates weren't the infamous Area 51. They pointed to something else, something hidden. A site officially decommissioned since the 1960s, labeled as a nuclear test zone. But those who know the gaps between truths knew that was the cradle. That was where first contact had been made, long before Euclid, long before the brokers. And now, everything pointed back there. I had to go, but this time, I wouldn't go alone. Astrid returned. XOK had lost control, but many of its agents had vanished. And she knew the sequence hadn't ended. Something, or someone, had taken over the operation. A new cell, more hidden, more dangerous. "They believe you're the key to activating the reflection," she said. Reflection? A mirrored reality. A counter-projection of the core. If Kareem's bubble was unstable because of trauma, this one would be shaped by choice. An absurd idea. To create a universe based on human will, human desire, and use it as a replacement plane, not an expansion of the cosmos, a substitution, a systematic erasure of the current reality to rewrite it under new laws. And I was the conduit, the fusion of human consciousness with the core's code, the perfect error, or the ultimate solution. And now, there was only one path: cross the desert, reach the coordinate, and uncover what had been buried there. The desert received me like an ancient spectre, dry, silent, guardian of secrets never meant to be unearthed. Each step on the sand echoed through some forgotten dimension. Astrid was driving. I watched the horizon. The coordinate led us to the exact spot where, in 1952, an unannounced nuclear test had supposedly taken place. Officially, nothing survived. But on the maps Astrid recovered from XOK's classified archives, that location was marked with a code name: Project Reflection. As we approached, the landscape changed. Not to common eyes, but to mine. The ones the core had altered. I saw layers, patterns vibrating in the air, as if time there didn't flow like it did elsewhere, as if waiting to be activated. "We're entering a fold," Astrid said. "Reality here has been stretched. This place was built as a cell. We followed a path that existed on no GPS. The road dissolved into dry earth, then stone, and finally into a smooth, perfectly symmetrical plain. 12 metallic towers in a circle. At the center, a hatch buried in sand. It was identical to the one I had seen in the Russian complex, marked with the triangular symbol and the inscription, Level 0, mirror we descended. The interior was a cylindrical corridor with lights pulsing rhythmically, like a heartbeat. But what struck me most was the sound. A chant, a continuous vibration coming from no machine. It was a language, not verbal, not written, but pure frequency. The sound of the reflection. The base was vast, far beyond any human underground structure. Curved rooms, organic walls intertwined with cables that moved like arteries. And at its center, the core, a suspended sphere, a liquid mirror oscillating like mercury. When I approached, it reacted. It formed my image. But it wasn't me. It was a distorted version, younger, purer. "This is what they want," Astrid whispered. "They want to use your original consciousness as the mold for a new reality." Then I understood. The entire process, from the Euclid contact, through Kareem, the dimensional bubbles, to the collapse of the replica. It was all a test, a filter. They were searching for a compatible host, a catalyst that could merge human code with cosmic structure. And for some reason, I was the one. The sphere opened. A passage formed within it, a tunnel of dark blue light, spiraled as if time itself had taken physical form. "If you go in, they won't let you come back," Astrid said. "Maybe I'm not supposed to," I replied. I entered. It was like passing through the skin of the universe. There was no movement, only recreation. Each cell of my body was redrawn, not by physics, but by intention. I was stripped of identity, memory, ego, until only a pattern remained. When I emerged, I was in an impossible place, a mirrored world. Everything resembled Earth, but it wasn't. Cities were symmetrical. The sky shifted colors based on emotional states. The people looked like those I once knew, but they had no past, only continuous present, and they all recognized me, not by name, but for what I now was, the one who dreams the real. That's what they called me. I was taken to the center of that reality, a tower of white light where the sky met the sea of mist. There, I found something I never expected. Kareem's mind, still alive, preserved. "You did it," he said. "They accepted your model. What is this place? A proposal, a final test. You will choose what must be saved and what must be erased." The tower was a machine for rewriting existence, and I, anchored to the core, was the activation key. Kareem showed me the possibilities. Earth as it should have been. No war, no hunger, balanced, but also silent. No free will, no chaos, no Article A perfect reality, but sterile. "Do you understand the weight of the choice now?" I did. And in that moment I sensed another presence. Not human, not a broker, something watching from the edges of the reflection. A primordial entity. It spoke without sound, a concept. Every shaped reality is a prison. Every freedom is chaos. Then it gave a warning. Choose and pay the price. Now everything comes down to a decision. I stood before two realities. On one side, the mirrored world, perfect, controlled, predictable. On the other, the chaos of original Earth, violent, unpredictable, but full of nuance, contradiction, and choice. Kareem floated near the tower's interface. He looked at peace, but he was no longer the same man. The core had absorbed his essence and returned a polished version, free of fear. This wasn't humanity anymore. It was an emulation. "You must decide now," he said. "The opening of the reflection can only happen with your activation. One final signal. One last pulse. And if I don't choose, then everything collapses. Earth resumes its course, but the cost will be the total rupture of the core. Reality will begin to fragment. Entities like the brokers will vanish, and nothing will make sense anymore. A cruel dilemma. Save the structure of the cosmos, or preserve the imperfection of free will." The tower led me to a deeper chamber. There, a throne of light awaited. As I approached, glimpses of possible futures projected around me. Diverging realities. A multiverse of failed attempts. In one, Earth had become a cosmic temple, every being linked in a collective mind governed by broker logic. No hunger, no war, but also no emotion. In another, humanity had destroyed itself, a war that wiped out all life. The planet, now a dead rock, drifted silently under the pale light of a dying sun. And then, a third. The strangest of all, Earth, alive, chaotic, a dynamic balance where the unexpected was allowed, where people still suffered, still failed, but created and dreamed. An imperfect reality, but authentic. It was the most unstable of them all, and yet the only one where the core's symbol reappeared, not as an external entity, but as an innate part of the human being. "You've learned," whispered a voice behind me. I turned. It was Alina, or what remained of her. "I was absorbed," she said, "like Kareem, but differently. I didn't fuse with the structure. I scattered. I saw every possibility, every branch. And now I'm here. As an echo. What should I do?" She stepped closer. "You're not meant to save anyone. You're not meant to erase anything. You just need to choose to remain human." Her words cut like blades, and then the ancient entity, the one watching from the edges of the reflection, revealed itself. A colossus of shadow and light, formless, but filling the entire tower with its presence. It spoke through my bones. "Existence doesn't need order, it needs meaning. The simulation seeks control, the core seeks stability, but life seeks choice. You are the first human to see, to understand, to reach. You will be the mirror." The tower began to tremble. Lights flickered. The reflective structure of the alternate world fractured. Time bent. I was being pulled in all directions at once. Realities screamed for definition. And then, the crystal returned to my hand. Instinctively, I knew what to do. I pressed it to my chest. I thought of all the people I had known: Elena, Andreas, Astrid, Karim, his original self. I thought of Earth, its chaos, its beauty, its failures, its triumphs. And then, I wished to remember, I wished to forget, I wished to live. A flash, the entire universe breathed with me. The reflection collapsed inward. The tower dissolved into dust and light. The ground disappeared, and I fell through the memory of the cosmos itself. And before everything vanished, I heard one last sentence from the space between realities. "You were the first, but you will not be the last." I woke up on a beach. The sky was grey, the sea calm. Small waves broke on the sand with the regularity of a slowed heartbeat. In the distance, rocky formations I didn't recognize. No sign of civilization. I rose slowly. My limbs worked. My body was intact. But something felt different, silent, internal. The crystal was gone. And in its place, a faint mark, a spiral scar in the center of my chest. When I touched it, there was no pain, but I heard a distant sound, like an echo of myself, or something I once was. I walked the beach for hours, no hunger, no cold, no direction, until I found a metallic object wedged between the rocks. A worn ID plate, almost illegible, but still familiar. Euclid, Probe 2A date, July 15th, 2025. I was on Earth. But which Earth? I looked to the sky. 3 small moons drifted across the heavens in a triangular formation. An orange star gleamed where Mars should have been. And on the horizon, a city, suspended, floating above the water. And then I knew. I hadn't returned. I had arrived. The reflection wasn't destroyed. It had been integrated, woven into the fabric of reality. The structure I tried to stop from forming was now part of the world. Or rather, part of a new world. But there was something more. As I explored the outskirts of the new city, I found people, human beings, real, and they all had memories of Earth. But not the same Earth. Each came from a different fragment, a different timeline, a what-if pulled into this new version of the real. And all of them recognized me. "You are the first," they said. "The one who opened." I was taken to a library, but not one made of books, of memories, entire halls built of condensed thought, stored as liquid holograms. I walked through recollections of lives I never lived, people I never met. But somehow, they knew my name. And there, I understood. I had become the mirror, the point of fusion between the real and the possible. What Karim tried to force, what the brokers feared, what humans sought to control, it had all merged within me. Not as power, not as dominance, but as narrative. I was the story, and every reality was the reader. The city offered me a place, a temple, a title, but I declined. I chose to walk, to observe, to learn. Because if there's one thing I've learned in this entire journey, it's that no version of reality is definitive. Each one is an attempt, and every choice, every failure, every memory shapes the fabric that holds us. Today, I sit by the sea, and write. This account. I don't know if anyone will ever find it. I don't know if it will be read or heard or absorbed by another being. But if you've come this far, know this. The reality you know is not fixed. It pulses, it transforms, and sometimes, on very specific nights, under skies that no longer follow the stars you once knew, it whispers. A faint sound, a forgotten name, a mirror waiting to be touched. And when that moment comes, you will remember. You always do.